we need to curate information and not just collect information, and do it with the audience in mind, because it makes their life so much easier.
The higher up the power structure in a company you go, the worse the presentations get. You're listening to the TJ Moore Podcast. Today's guest is Libby Magliolo from Dallas, Texas. We've all sat through 1,000 bad presentations, and Libby has made it her professional mission to empower people to build better ones. She's a professor at Southern Methodist University's Cox School of Business. Known as the Slide Master, she trains high performers how to make their presentations not only look better, but also work better, including how to deliver a clear message, leading to more effective outcomes. Libby, thanks so much for joining me for today's conversation.
TJ, thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Now, part of what you teach is that most professionals have been told to be concise, tell a better story, or show more executive presence, but they're rarely taught what that actually looks like in practice. So I think people would like to know, what is one of the highest stakes presentations that you've ever had to coach a client or a company to give?
A lot of different high stakes rooms come to mind, because when you think about the way we present ourselves and the way we present information, there are so many high stakes moments. Everything from, I really want this executive level job. Well, a job interview is a presentation. You have to present information in a certain way. I've coached plenty of sales teams where, okay, well, this is a $65 million deal that's on the table, and I have to present information in the right way. Or we're going into our earnings call tomorrow, and we need to make sure that we're prepared. So there are so many different high stakes moments that come to mind. And while many of those may not come to mind for folks as this is a presentation experience, we are very much presenting ourselves as well as information. And the way we present it directly dictates the outcome of that conversation. So many high impact moments that happen where we have to be able to present information effectively.
I just want to share briefly some statistics from the University of Florida that they've published, these findings from survey research. So less than 10% of people actually enjoy public speaking, while an estimated 5 to 10% suffer from severe, debilitating phobia of public speaking.
The old Jerry Seinfeld joke is that number one fear that people share is public speaking, and number two is death, which means that if you're going to a funeral, you would rather be in the coffin than doing the eulogy. So I think that's very, very, I think it's very on the nose about how people feel about public speaking. You are giving information for people to have a discussion. You are not putting on a performance. So I think the emphasis is put in the wrong place of, I have to go in there and I have to play the role and I have to look perfect. When in reality, I wish people would spend time thinking about their audience and who their audience is and the questions that they're going to have and the information that they are looking for, rather than, is my voice shaking? Am I going to lose my place? Audiences are actually fairly forgiving of those human moments, of your voice shaking, of you losing your spot. Most people don't even notice when those things happen a few times. What audiences are not forgiving of is an unprepared speaker who doesn't know their material. So I think folks focus on the wrong thing. They focus on, oh no, my voice can't shake, when in reality, they need to focus on, do I know my information better than anyone? And have I thought about the questions that are going to come up?
You have a newsletter sign-up form on your website, buildbetterslides.com. And it starts with this phrase, which I love, because life's too short for ugly slides. Once a month, you share the best presentation tips, tools, and templates. Why do visuals such as charts, graphics, statistics, photos, clips help people remember ideas so much better than just text?
We can process visual information so much more quickly than we can a wall full of text. If we walk into a meeting and I'm basically putting a Word document on a slide and it's 8-point font and you can't read it, then the assumption is the work is very possibly disorganized and not thoughtfully prepared. If you have put together a really thoughtful presentation, what that likely means is you have gone through the thought process of figuring out what needs to be in this presentation because it supports my core message, and what needs to be left out or put in the appendix because it's extraneous detail that possibly distracts from my core message. So when I see a very visual slide, what I equate that with is this person has put thought, care, and preparation into this. They have thought about their audience. They have thought about what the core message is and how to portray that as cleanly, clearly, and visually as possible so that my audience has the best chance at comprehension as possible. So yes, visuals are wonderful, but they also signal something really important about the preparation that the speaker has done.
I've been to boardroom presentations and live presentations for an audience that had zero visuals. Oh my gosh. It was like a bit difficult to even look at the material because I was like, we could have just read this. We don't even need you up there talking at this point, you know?
Right. That's the number one complaint of audiences. It's kind of two sides of the same coin, which is they had incredibly text-filled slides, and then they stood up there and read the slides to us. And we all hate that. I like to say, in my trainings that only once in my adult life have I presented to an illiterate audience. And it was last year when I got invited to be the mystery reader for my daughter's pre-K class. So it was a room full of 4-year-olds. So that was the only time in my adult life that I have spoken to a non-reading audience. Other than that, corporate adult audiences can read, so there's no need to read to them. The reason we hate it is because it signals to our audience, I do not have anything of value to add beyond what you can see on the screen behind me. And then we feel like our time is not valued because if we're just reading it all together, then we could have just dropped it in an email.
And speaking of mystery stories, there was an interview you did where the host used an analogy about burying the lead in a presentation. So she called it Scooby-Dooing it.
Right.
Which I was like, oh my gosh, it's so memorable. And she said, if you unmask the villain at the end, it's like, oh, there's so much suspense. And what is my final point going to be? So how should presenters incorporate their main point directly into the first moments or slides?
I talk about how we structure our presentations as murder mystery novels, when in reality, we need to structure them like newspaper articles. So like you said, it was the wonderful Mary Baird who said that, like in a murder mystery novel, someone gets killed in the first chapter, the famous detective comes to town, we spend the whole time collecting clues and everything. And then in the second to last chapter, we found out who the killer is. But I do not have the world's best track record for finishing books. And sometimes I'll never make it past the first chapter or, life gets in the way. I have to turn it back into the library. And I never find out who actually the killer is. And then I have to Google it. And we structure our presentations like this. The reason we do this is because this is the way that we analyze. We dig through the information, we find more information, and then we figure out what that information means. And based on that information, we make a recommendation. And so we bring our audience through that same journey. Hey, here's all this interesting data. Hey, here's what it means. Hey, here's what I think that we should do as a result of that. Two big problems with that is, one, attention spans are so short. People bring what I call their TikTok brains to presentations, which is we decide within 2 or 3 seconds whether we're going to engage with content or not. And the other reason is that people need context before you just dive into information. So this is the most important thing that I teach. This is called the pyramid principle. Folks also call it bluff, bottom line up front. You need to lead with your recommendation. When you think about a newspaper article, the most important information in that article is in the headline. Sometimes you only read the headlines. And at the end of it, you think, I still have a general sense of what is happening right now because those headlines are front loaded with information. Newspaper articles are written in descending order of importance. Most important information up front, followed by the next most and next most down from there. That's exactly how we should structure our presentations. We should assume that we probably have 30 to 60 seconds of complete attention at the beginning of a presentation before brains start to wander, phones start to come out, people think about what we're having for lunch. So you lead with your recommendation. Hi, my name is Libby Magliolo. I'm the marketing director here. Today, we're going to be talking about why we need an increase in our social media budget because our agency has raised internal costs due to AI token usage or whatever it is. We have captured attention. We have told people the destination that we are heading to, and we've given them the context that they need for that journey. So leading with the answer is one of the most impactful changes you can make. That's not only going to increase audience comprehension, but also position you and make you look like a more prepared, polished, and poised speaker in the room.
If people just apply that alone
Yes.
to their information, People would
Yes.
be so grateful. They were like, oh my gosh, now I know why we're here. So we've all been to a meeting that it was like, this did not need to be a meeting. If you're the presenter, how do you know if it can be just communicated in an email or a memo that's written only versus a presentation?
When I was at Southwest Airlines, when you brought a presentation in front of the executive team to even get on the calendar, you had to say this is an inform presentation, a discuss presentation, or a decide presentation, because you were defining what success looked like for that presentation before you even walked into the room. So the executive team knew, okay, this is an informed presentation keeping us up to date on this project, or we need to decide something before we walk out of here. So I think that's a valuable lens. Am I just keeping people up to date on something? You know what? We might be able to just email that information. We still use the pyramid principle, bottom line up front. We send an email and say that, the internet version of this is TLDR, but you send the one sentence summary of updating you about Project Alpha. We're on time, we're on budget, but we have these dependencies from technology, and then you can put the information below. It's really only in those discuss and decide meetings and conversations when we might actually need to get together in person. And once we do, you don't have to bring slides. You don't have to bring visuals. You have to ask yourself, would a visual increase comprehension on the part of my audience? If you have data and you have data that can be visualized, the answer very well may be yes. Data visualizations are a fantastic way to help your audience understand what's going on. You can get folks together, but think about what success looks like and whether you need visuals to support that definition of success.
I remember hearing you say in an interview that the presenter is there for the vocal portion.
Yes.
And so the presentation needs to be the visual portion, and those need to work together. And that really stuck with me because you're like, otherwise, we would just email you a PDF of the actual slide deck, like we do for investors when they're just trying to understand, what does your company even do?
You and your slides are a team, and you two as teammates should be doing two different jobs. Think about a children's book. There are words and there are illustrations, and both of those roles are very, very important. They increase comprehension, but only when they work together.
One of the biggest complaints that people get when they're in a bad presentation is there's too much information to look at. Like someone has just copied and pasted the entire spreadsheet to look at. Like they just are giving you way too much. And you've told me off camera that you have some analogies, including a chocolate cake recipe and also IKEA furniture. So how is this related to decluttering someone's presentation?
So I tell the story about my husband's birthday, and every year on his birthday, I make him this really, really, really good chocolate cake. It's so much work, and somehow cutting a circle out of parchment paper is the hardest step of the entire thing. I feel like I need a PhD to do that, but it's a ton of work. It's a ton of work, and the cake is phenomenal. Picture my husband coming home, knowing that he's going to get this amazing chocolate cake on his birthday. And he walks in the door and he sees on the kitchen table, I have the flour sitting out, I have the buttermilk, I have all of the ingredients sitting right there on the table. And he would say, what is this? And I would say, well, it's your birthday cake, Mr. Ungrateful. What are we talking about here? And he would say, no, it's not. It's not a cake. This is just ingredients. And I would say, okay, listen, it is a cake. You do have to do a couple of things to it. Like you do have to turn on the oven, and you do have to do the parchment paper thing yourself, and you have to mix things, and there's espresso that gets involved, and I don't think we have any. So yeah, you do have to do stuff, but like everything you need to make this amazing cake, it's right here. You just have to do the work versus him coming home on his birthday, walking in the door. I have done everything. I have cleaned up the kitchen like the phenomenal partner I am. And he's walking in and all he has to do is consume because I have done all the work. I say this because this is how most of us build our presentations. We give people a ton of information, and this becomes what you reference as the IKEA presentation, some assembly required, that all the information that you need to get your questions answered, to get the insights that you need, to make the business decisions that you need to make, every single thing that you need is right here. But you do have to do a little bit of work. You have to wade through the data. You have to figure out what's important. You have to do the analysis. You have to spot the trends and then hopefully make your decisions based off of that. Versus what we need to be doing is we need to do that work. We do the assembly work. We put the cake together. We put the dresser together. It is incumbent upon us as presenters to do the work, to curate information and figure out the story rather than just dumping raw data and raw information on them, because that makes them do a lot of work. And if we're making them do a lot of work, we're probably not going to get a yes on whatever it is that we're asking for.
Now, there's so many options for how to create slide decks faster, such as Canva, Gamma, Pitch, Prezi, and other websites and tools. So how do you personally feel about people using these tools? Are they making it better? Or is it just faster to do?
I've gotten the question a lot lately. Well, why do we really need to learn how to build presentations? We have Claude Design, we have Canva, AI, whatever. And I understand the question. I am the world's biggest lover of AI tools. I tell my husband that I have 3 men in my life, and one of them is my husband. The other one is the Frenchman in my life, Claude, and the other one is who I call Chad, which is ChatGPT. So I have Claude and Chad in my life, and I rely on both of them day in, day out, and they make my life easier. And there are some aspects of a presentation that Claude and Chad are very, very good at. Research, information synthesis, outlining, very, very, very good. They make my life easier and actually faster. Where I start to get a little nervous is when we're trying to outsource the entire presentation process to an AI tool. I'm a big believer in the model of AI as intern, which means your intern can be incredibly helpful. But if you had a high stakes presentation to the CEO, you would never hit print on the intern's work and walk right into the CEO's office. You would make sure you felt comfortable with what was being put together. So the AI tools out there are fantastic, but I have not found one from a design perspective that makes my life substantially easier, because back in my corporate days, I knew that the CFO liked data a certain way, and she was always going to ask about something. And then I knew that the chief revenue officer liked data a different way, and he was absolutely going to ask about something different. I knew that one person hated footnotes, one person loved footnotes. I knew that one executive never moved off the executive summary slide. And so I had to be prepared to give my whole discussion just on the executive summary slides. AI doesn't pick up on those nuances and know how to do those things. And I don't think it does a great job of finding the business relevant story and weaving that into a presentation. It's great at the mechanics of things, and you can get it to create a great presentation. It needs a ton of hand holding and correcting and guidance for you to get an output that you feel really, really good about.
Sometimes those programs can help get the bones, on the skeleton, but you can't get the muscles on there and you can't make it dance. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
All right. Part of your LinkedIn, you have on the featured section a clickable button that takes people directly to your store on buildbetterslides.com, where they can purchase, download all kinds of incredible digital products and also courses. You have 50 plus professionally designed PowerPoint slide templates. You have guides, checklists, frameworks, also video training, tutorials, and monthly editions of new templates and resources with a membership library that also has unlimited access to all current and future content. Can you just tell us how you began to develop all of these resources and what clients have gained from using them?
I love creating digital products because my goal is to make the entire presentation lifecycle faster and easier for folks and give them the tools that they need to make more impactful presentations and do it faster and better. It's almost nobody's full-time job to sit down and create presentations. There's this misconception that I just need to find the right template. And if I find a really pretty template and I just draw my information in, then problem solved, I'm done. The products that I make, I try very hard to teach alongside those products and say, hey, I designed a gorgeous template for you, but what I'd love for you to do is sit down and think about your audience and think about your message and think about your story before you use this template.
We've all seen the ones where people are doing a lot of data dumping. So how can this backfire on their audience's response to watching the presentation?
Data dumping can backfire massively. We think we're being thorough. Our audience feels overwhelmed, and usually they do not even engage with the material. So the greatest act of service that we can do for our audience is figure out what's important before we ever start building slides, before we ever walk into that room. So we're making life easier on them to understand what the story is and what's important.
Are there any slides that you see all the time that people should just take out?
I don't see the point of an agenda slide because we usually end up wasting the first 30 seconds of a presentation telling everybody, well, we're going to go over quarterly results, and then we're going to skip to this. And then after that, we're going to open it up for Q&A. That doesn't do anything for you or for your audience. Get rid of the agenda slide, replace it with an objective slide or an executive summary slide, and it's so much better.
I've also seen so many times where people, their verbal intro of themselves and their career, all their companies and accolades, they have it mirrored on the first slide. So you're reading, it gets a little weird because you're like reading what they're saying and it pulls you out of it. And you're like, wait a minute, this is getting kind of meta. Like now I'm inside the presentation. And I think that can be a big issue. It's like Blue's Clues. Like you just jumped inside there because you really don't need it spelled out that way.
If I can say something highly, highly controversial, the original Steve from Blue's Clues is my one and only. Blue's Clues was playing in my house this calendar day. So again, I am sorry to divide people like this, but there is and can only be one for me, and it's original Steve. So tell us why you got into that industry. Tell us the hardest moment of your work within the last year. Tell us your goals for the group that you see in front of you.
We already know that some of the most viewed TED Talks on YouTube that have tens of millions of views start with a compelling story. And if they need a visual, usually they're showing what the story is about in action. So there's not even words up there. We're showing visually, either through slides or clips. Some of them just start with a clip and they're like, look at me, I'm doing this, or this is my kid, and your instant connection and relatability.
The piece of advice that I give people, especially when they're just terrified, just petrified of public speaking, what I will tell them is, I want you to get up and I want you to say some version of this. And I want you to get up and say, everyone, I am so glad to be here today. And I want to let you know, I'm actually pretty nervous to be here. And if you hear my voice shake or if you hear me sound nervous, please know that it's because I've worked really hard on this information and I want to make sure that I use your time well. So I would ask you just to give me a bit of grace because I am trying to use our time effectively. So I really appreciate that moving forward. Now, it seems like something that would completely undermine our credibility. Oh my gosh, we're pointing out how nervous we are, when in reality, it's this incredibly human, relatable moment. It calls out the elephant in the room. Every single person can relate because more than likely they've had that instance too of being terrified of public speaking. So being a human in some way, and there is an appropriate way to be a human, show vulnerability in any situation. I don't care if it's the most corporate meeting or a TED Talk, there's a way to do it effectively. And almost always it strengthens the conversation.
I had a presentation one time, I think it was a history class. And for some reason I had gotten food poisoning, but I didn't know that. So my only symptom was like extreme dizziness out of nowhere. And then just like, I need to lay down right now.
No.
Now, I was totally prepared and I was the first person who was supposed to speak. So I had to be perfectly honest. I got up there. I was like, I'm going to fight through this. And then I pulled it up and I said, guys, I'd be so honest with you. I am blacking out right now. I don't know what's going on. I'm seeing purple. I have to sit down. I have to get out of here. You cannot fight through that. It's better to wait and be your best self than be literally losing your vision
Right.
because you have food poisoning,
Right.
people are gonna understand instantly. Yes. And they're all like, you're never sick. So obviously you're not faking this. I mean,
right.
There's a story you have about your husband of being an engineer with a capital E. How does this relate to presentation building?
We have 2 little girls. They're 3 and 5. They're absolutely trying to destroy us. And I mean that in an actual literal sense, not like an emotional sense. I think they were sent here and trained by the government to destroy us. So a couple of years ago, we went on vacation to Florida. And like you do when you have young kids, you pack all their stuff. And I said, hey, do you think we need rain jackets for the girls? So my husband got out his phone and he said, okay, well, on Monday, the low is 58 and the high is 74, and there's an 18% chance of rain. On Tuesday, the low is 62 and the high is 79, and there's a 34% chance of rain. And he went through every single day that we were going to be there. He read me every single data point from the forecast. And he looked up at me at the end like, I did it. Question answered. I did good.
And in his way, he answered it in his way. Yeah,
he did. He would have answered. Another engineer would have thought, this guy's crushing.
I mean,
love. And this is what we tend to do in our presentations, is that our audience has business questions that they need answered, and they need to answer. Should we change our territory planning strategy for our sales team? Do we need to switch vendors due to rising costs? Do we need to rethink our marketing strategy? So their question is never going to be, hey, can you read me like 100 data points and then just sit there silently in front of me? They have business decisions that they need to make and questions that they need answered. And so that to me is a helpful framing of what we do in presentations. We just bring data and think that it's sufficient, when in reality, what we need to do is help them answer the question. I know what's on your mind is that we may need to switch vendors due to rising costs. I put some information together about that, and here's my recommendation based on the data that I'm seeing. So helping them to answer those questions rather than just bringing data and thinking that that is sufficient.
This made me think of if someone is like trying to fix a car, and then if your dad came by with the toolbox out of the garage and just like dumped all the tools on the ground, and he's like, you figure it out. It's like, okay, so great, but which one do I need to fix the tire? You know, the higher up the power structure in a company you go, the worse the presentations get. By the time they need to make some visuals for what they're going to talk about, they just slapdash that together late at night, or they have their assistant do it, or somebody that works for them that does not understand the numbers or the facts. And so they're just sort of like, here you go. And then they look at it the morning of like, yeah, I'll just punch through this and we're going to make it through this, folks. But they didn't even make it, you know?
I hate the process of getting dressed in the morning. So I've often thought it would be amazing if I could have a fairy godmother who came into my home and just made this decision for me so I didn't have to worry about it. Well, what if my wish came true and I did get a fairy godmother and she said, Libby, I heard that you had this problem and you don't know what to wear. And she leads me by the hand into a warehouse and she says, what I have put together in this warehouse is every single article of clothing in the entire world. Your problem is now solved. You're welcome. And I would say, listen, this actually made my life harder because before I had like 4 sweaters and 2 of them don't fit and there's a hole in one of them. And so I didn't have to do a ton of work. And now you're making me go through this warehouse every single morning to figure out what I want to wear. I'm good. No, thank you. The fairy godmother comes back and I walk into my bedroom and on the bed is laying an outfit that she picked out for me. And she says, what I did was I looked at your calendar and I know that you have a lunch meeting today and I know what the weather's going to be and I know what colors you like and I know how you like things to fit and I know your sizes. And so what I did was I went through the warehouse and I picked out an outfit for you. So all you need to do is put that outfit on. And I would say, crushed, perfect, love. This is the mindset that we bring into our presentations and the mindset that we should bring into our presentations. We say, Every single thing is here. Everything you need to put together a great story is here. You just have to go through it. And we're passing along that work to our audience when in reality, we need to be the fairy godmother. We need to think, okay, what is this executive's preferred communication style? What's their appetite for data? Do they like a pre-read? Do they like a leave behind? Do they like to focus on the executive summary? Do they like to dig into the data? We need to be the fairy godmother because we need to go sort through all of that information with that executive and their objectives and their KPIs and what their pet projects are and how much time they have. We need to sort through the information with them in mind.
The theme with this is decision paralysis.
Yes.
And it covers so many areas, not just making presentations, but communication in general. They've also done surveys with companies where they give them 5 options of where you want to go on a cruise to do like a workshop. And then they'll give another group only 2 options. The people who only had 2 options and it was narrowed down for them, that they actually reported enjoying it a lot more. They didn't have as much fear of missing out as the ones who had 5 options. They're like, you know what, this would have been more fun if we were in this area of the world instead. And they sort of start comparing them a lot more hypothetically, and they don't enjoy the one they're on as much. And I think the same can happen when we're presented too many options.
We need to curate information and not just collect information and do it with the audience in mind because it makes their life so much easier.
One of your clients, Chad Holmes, has recommended you saying PowerPoint presentations are simple, right? That's what I used to think. Libby has enlightened me to so many different tips and tricks to make the presentation more effective, engaging, and memorable. Libby does so many different types of in-person workshops, presentations, and also she facilitates with companies to come directly to do these sessions that are half day or full day. The best way to get in contact with Libby is to go to buildbetterslides.com or set up a discovery call with her directly on LinkedIn.
My goal has always been to put together and deliver the best training that you have ever sat through. That is my goal, and I try every single day to deliver on that. The way we show up to work and the way we present ourselves and present information is so important. It changes the trajectory of our careers. So I take very seriously the responsibility to teach people how to do that excellently because it can absolutely change their career. So I'd be thrilled to talk with any folks who have more questions or would like to explore further.
Libby, thanks so much for joining me for today's conversation.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
To hear more experts share their story, subscribe to the TJ Moore Podcast on YouTube and follow this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to listen anywhere you go. Like and comment on this video if you found today's conversation valuable, and share this episode with someone in your life. I'll see you next week.